Welcome to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Linkowski. I am the owner of Milestone Franchising. I'm a certified franchise consultant representing over 500 concepts in the franchise world. Franchise Focus is all about shining a spotlight on people in franchising, and we love to talk to owners in the franchise space. And today with me is Rick Lutz, who is the franchise owner of SERVPRO of Warrington, Abington, Center City, and the surrounding areas. And welcome, Rick.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here, Lisa.
Well, we're happy to have you, Rick. We've got so much to talk about, so we're going to get right to it because you've got a fantastic story. So, Rick, we're going to talk about SERVPRO, and SERVPRO, for those that do not know, is a remediation, restoration, franchise, and we're going to talk way more about that, but I want to talk about you because you've got a really interesting story. And can you share with the audience, what were you doing before this?
Sure. Well, it goes back a long way because my grandfather was in trucking, so my dad was in trucking, so therefore the pathway for me was pretty clear. I was in trucking business, and so I spent almost 19 years in the trucking business before SERVPRO.
Yeah.
So it was very good business, and we did rather well, but there were changes, and so we weren't willing to go along with the changes, and we were always looking for another opportunity. So the opportunity came in my mid-30s.
In your mid-30s, and this was a change with both you and your wife, so your wife's on board.
Yep.
You're both sitting there trying to figure out what that next step is,
Yep.
and where do you go after trucking, because trucking is such a specific type of business that often people they kind of get trapped in it because they don't know what else where they're going to go, right?
Well, and I was a product of that because I didn't go to college. I came right out of high school, jumped right in a truck, and I was really just spent 100-hour weeks driving the truck. And so my wife and I always talked about the opportunity of what we would do if we had an opportunity to change, and so then the opportunity came. And we were staring it right down right at us. What are we going to do? And so we had to make a couple difficult decisions with two kids, and being 35. And so franchising seemed to be really the only option for us because I didn't have a college education. I needed training, and I didn't have time to build something up from the ground really slow. It was immediate.
Now, speaking of slow, this was not a fast decision for you guys.
No,
so talk to me about that, because I know this was a very long decision that it took for you to make this.
Well, it was a hard decision because it was an incredible change of life. I'm used to driving a truck, and now I'm going to go into disaster restoration. And SERVPRO happened to be the very first thing that we looked at getting out of the trucking business. So how could the very first thing be the one that you're going to choose, right? And so 2 years later, we came back to that. And as a matter of fact, it was the person that sells the franchises, he was the only person that stayed in touch with us the entire 2 years. Mm. And so we came back to that because we figured that was the kind of support and kind of surrounding influence that we needed. Was what he was giving.
Right, and made you feel more comfortable,
yeah,
right?
Sure
and
did.
To your point, I know when I go to the card store and I pick up the first card and I hit it right out of the park, but then I look at 20 more and I end up coming right back to that first one.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. How many concepts did you look at? Do you remember?
We looked at a number of them. We narrowed it down to two. It was a bicycle franchise, and it was SERVPRO. We wound up going with SERVPRO because it was something that looked like it wasn't affected by the economy. It was something that was going to be a little bit more steady. And the trucking business had just come through in the 80s, had come through a time where it got really slow, and we didn't want it to be that again. So
right. No. So you were mindful about the economy, which here we are again, really needing to be mindful about that economy. So tell us, time frame wise, when was this? What year did you become an owner of SERVPRO?
It was March of 1993.
1993. All right. So so
29 years ago.
Oh, right. So you're coming on your 30th anniversary. Yep. So that's when I say there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot. So your wife's on board. She's supportive, and I always tell everyone, my candidates, I say, you've got to have that family. You've got to have them on this journey with you because it's a bumpy ride, and if you don't have their support along the way, that's just going to make for a more difficult and challenging time, and you've got young kids, and you're changing something completely different. So how was it out of the gate for you?
Well, it was slow because you know, I had to change everything that I knew, and I had to actually dress up and go and do sales, like in-person sales, and I had never done that before, and so there were a bunch of things. You know, people talk about fear and pushing through the fear. I had to push through a lot of fears, a lot of uncertainties, but on the other side of it, we didn't have a big cushion behind us, so there was an urgency that was there that that a lot of people don't have today. You know, they come into the business with, you know, a nest egg or something behind them. I didn't have anything behind me, no safety net, and so that was a good encouragement for me. And of course, I had great support from my wife. You know, she was great through the whole thing.
Well, and not to mention, 30 years ago, internet,
nothing.
GPS systems, you know, just any of that. Like, this was old school, knocking on doors,
Yes.
you know, having a map, pinpointing where you're going, right?
Hand delivering invoices because we didn't have a fax machine. We thought we were on top of the world when we got our fax machine. So.
Can you imagine? Like, this is the way that it was.
Yeah.
No, you know, and email was just kind of probably not even really being utilized at that time in your industry at all, because that was more for the corporate, you know, in the corporate world. So yeah, so lots of challenges, but it was the way that everyone did business back then.
Well, it gave me a chance to shake the hands of people that I was working with. And I think that went a long way, because you can read a lot about a person when you shake their hand.
Yeah, it's people, you do business with people that you know, like, and trust, right? And it's said over and over and over again, but it's the truth. So do you remember your very first person that you signed on? Like, and how long was that after you had signed on with the franchise?
Well, it was probably about 3 months, and this one agency, he and I hit it off right away, and so he sent me a first water damage, and we went out and I did it. I was in the truck reading the book, you know, trying to make sure that I remember all the notes that I had taken, and yeah, the first water damage that we had, all of our equipment was out. It was 1 dehumidifier and 2 fans. And we didn't know what we would do if we got another call. But I mean, I say that because it's very, very humble beginnings, and I remember those beginnings, but you know, how this changed is pretty amazing. Yeah,
and it keeps you grounded. So, you know, I was just asking you, how many vehicles do you have? And you said that you have over 22 vehicles. So to go from one dehumidifier and, you know, and now how many pieces of equipment do you have? Do you even know? Do you even have a count?
Over 700 fans and 200 dehumidifiers and a whole warehouse full of stuff that I'm not even sure I know where everything is.
What everything is. So yeah, that is a big, but of course it's over 30 years, so it's quite the difference. But you remember that very first one and thinking, what am I going to do if I get a second call, because I don't have the equipment for it? But it all worked out, and then you just continue to expand and grow this business. So yeah, incredible. So let's talk about SERVPRO. SERVPRO is large. It is just a dominating space in the restoration, you know, industry out there. So you got in at the midway point, the halfway point, the quarter point. Where were you?
Well, it started in '67, and so we came in '93. Probably 1,000 franchises at the time. Today there's over 2,000 franchises, and so they've expanded into Canada, and we expect that they're going to, you know, make more expansions as they go. And so, but it's a big organization and run incredibly well.
Yeah, and they would be termed as an empire. You know, I often have people on the show that are in that very beginning, you know, stage, that emerging stage, but this is the opposite end of the spectrum, where it is big and they're going international, and, you know, they've been around for decades and just growing and just no stopping. So you came in, it seems like, at that midway point, and by that point, everything is, they know what they're doing, right? They've got it pretty well together.
There's been a lot of changes, though. I mean, so, you know, originally it was a painting company, and they did they did carpet cleaning, and they encouraged the franchises to do a little bit of each. And it was in the late 90s when we could see that a bunch of new offices were coming in, a bunch of new franchise owners were coming in, and they were having this incredible success. But we went and asked them what they were doing, and they were doing 100% insurance work. And so the industry changed, or SERVPRO changed to basically 100% insurance work, where it used to do a lot of the other things. Now, franchises can do the other things, but a lot of them just do 100% insurance work.
And your focus is 100% on the insurance work?
It is.
And is it commercial, residential, both?
Yep.
Both.
It's both.
Okay.
Right.
And tell us about, you already talked about water damage. What are some other areas that you're assisting with out there?
Well, fire, smoke, water, sewer, mold, COVID. We've been doing, well, not too much anymore, but that was a kind of a surprise for us. Vandalism, and unfortunately, sometimes we have to deal with, suicide and those types of biohazard cleanups and those types of things. But majority of the stuff is fire and water, smoke.
Right, and those things that just happen, and that's when we talk about the economy, recession-proof, inflation-proof, pandemic-proof, because these things happen, whether any of this is happening, it does not matter. And when you have damage like that, you can't just sit around doing nothing. You've got to handle it. And furthermore, it's typically covered by insurance, so this is all dealt with on the insurance end. So that makes things a little bit easier from a business standpoint, because you're working. Now, do you work, I would assume, with all insurance carriers? It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, most is pretty much the same with everybody. We give them, prove that we drive the thing, as the water damage, we prove that we drive through readings and all that kind of stuff. And so most insurance companies want the same type of data, when it comes to handling the loss.
Right.
So.
And do the insurance companies require multiple quotes, or it does not matter? Like, how does that work today?
Some don't. It's really different. It's really up to the adjuster. But if we have a trusted relationship with somebody like that, a lot of times they'll just let us do, what we're supposed to do. So.
Okay. And because you're such a large entity, and I should point out that you and I were put together by Disaster Dina, who, who we love. Thank you, Dina, and who has talked. I'm in a networking group with her, and when I met with her, and she said that when there are catastrophes that happen around the country, that you guys are big enough that you can go deploy people to those disaster areas and help out. What's the last one that you did that for?
Well, it's been a couple of years now since we've gone on a storm team, but SERVPRO has an incredible storm system, where they have storm leaders that go into an area and you sign up with them, and it's the same price list, it's the same management, it's just uniformity when a whole bunch of officers come into an area. So I think the most recent one was when we had the storm just go through. Ida just went through our area just recently. We called the storm team in, and they basically got 15,000 phone calls, in a couple days, and they recruited a whole bunch of officers to come in, and it was just a wonderful way to handle the enormous workload.
Right, because the magnitude hits, no one's prepared.
No one.
And it's just that quick, and everyone needs help.
Yep.
Immediately, and so it's all hands on deck.
Yep.
And because you're a franchise, you get to work within the system with all the other franchise owners.
Yep.
And you all come in and you're all helping out, and to your point, it's all the same pricing, it's all the same, like what to expect.
Uniformity. Yep.
Uniformity, which is one of the beauties of franchising, right?
It is the beauty of it, and it's wonderful to have trusted partners in the business that, some people would say, oh, they're competition, but they're not the competition. They're there to help, and it's really wonderful.
Right, because they have their own area that they're servicing, right? So you just get to hear from them about how they handle a different situation, how they tackle it, and likewise, I'm sure with your 30 years of experience, people are coming to you and asking you for sage advice.
You get a chance to help, and then you also get a chance to ask others for help. So it's just a wonderful relationship. It really is.
Well, perfect. Well, we are going to cover so much more after a word from our sponsors, and especially Zoom One Media. Stay tuned.
Aloha. Joe Silva here with Kukua Technologies. I'm excited to see you on Tuesdays on Morning Coffee for our tech tips.
Let's face it, lawyers get a bad rap. I'm Erin Brucey, host of Legal Breakdown, where we dissect legal topics for the everyday viewer, with a mix of interesting guests to talk about current events and hot legal topics. Let's work together to make the law accessible and relevant to everyone. Catch us every week on RVN Television.
A stroke can be easy to detect. A loved one can't speak, perhaps they can't move. But there's another sign of a stroke that many of us can't see. It's called spatial neglect, and it can occur during or after a stroke, causing distorted visual movements. Fortunately, there's a solution by using optical prism technology during rehabilitation. If you or a loved one have experienced a stroke, ask your doctor about spatial neglect. Spatial neglect. See the whole picture at KesslerFoundation.org.
Welcome back to Franchise Focus. I'm your host, Lisa Linkowski, and sitting with me is the franchise owner of SERVPRO, Rick Lutz. And Rick, you are over in the Warrington, Abington, Jenkintown, Center City area, and I'm so pleased to have you on today. So before the break, we were talking about, the value of franchising, and, the fact that you've been a business owner for 30 years is not to be diminished, because it's not for everyone. It's tough. It's a really tough area when you decide that you want to be in it. And when we had first spoken, a statement that you had made had terrific impact on me, and I think it's going to on the audience as well. And for those that are interested in becoming business owners, whether it's a franchise or not. And that statement was, sometimes everyone got paid except for you and your wife.
Sure.
Talk to us about that.
Well, in the beginning, the cash flow is always a problem, right? The cash flow, even after 30 years, sometimes it's a problem. But we committed very early on that everyone on the job was going to get paid, whether it was our employees, whether it was subcontractors, whatever the case was. It was taxes, it was the building rent, and no matter what happened, we were committed to making sure that everybody got paid. And sometimes that left us on the short end, and so. But they're the sacrifices that you make, and understanding that it'll get better, or hoping that it'll get better, or trusting that it'll get better. And
right.
so.
And 30 years later, clearly it has.
It has.
And of course, you get those dips or those those boulders chucked at you, and
Sure.
you've got to be able to figure it out. Just like you talked about that you handled COVID. Like, who knew you would ever be in the pandemic business?
Right.
But that's what has to happen in every business. So
You need
let's
to be
chat.
flexible. You need to be
Right, be flexible. Right, dodge and weave.
You have to know when to be strong and when to stick to it, and you have to know when to be flexible.
Okay. And speaking of your wife, and what's her name, by the way?
Christina.
Christina. So Christina's in this journey with you. She worked in the business with you for a long time.
She did.
What is that? And who in your family is with you today?
Well, it's interesting because she grew up in a very different family. Her dad was in the military, and so it was very regimented. And so, when I was in the trucking business, she's the first girl I ever dated, and we got married. So we married 44 years, and 4 wonderful kids and 5 grandbabies, and all that stuff. So we've been through a lot together. But she said to me early on, "When are you going to get a real job?" And I said, "I do. I have a real job. What do you mean?" And she said, "No, I mean like working for the government or that type of thing, where there's security." And I said, "No, the security is having my own business where I know if I'm going to get laid off tomorrow in my own business. I don't know if I'm going to get laid off tomorrow in the military or wherever the case is." And so we came from very, very different backgrounds, but she was very, very supportive. She knew we agreed that we wanted to make a difference in our family, and so she worked in the business for 10 years, 12 years, until she left the business when we went to China and we adopted 2 little girls. So.
Right. And you say that you attribute the fact of being able to travel across the world to owning your own business and adopting these beautiful girls, right?
It's one of the hardest things that you ever do to run a business, but there's reward and there's benefits, and we've seen them, and we've been very, very pleased and very blessed by them.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see you're getting emotional, and it's, you know, and that's why I told you guys from the beginning, this is going to be a great interview, and it's the truth. And Rick is a super humble guy. I'm sure that that's coming across. So who's working in the business now today?
Well, just blessed to have our son as a partner, and you know, very shortly I believe he'll be taking over. He runs a day-to-day operation right now.
And what is his name? Steve. Okay.
You know, he's been with us for right out of high school as well, and so he's been an incredible benefit to the business. He's got a world of knowledge, and he really knows what he's doing, and so pleased with that. When my wife left the business, our daughter came in to run all the finances, and she's been with us for almost 17 years, but she just recently left us to be a stay-at-home mom as well, and so
wonderful.
And she's going to open up her own real estate business and that kind of stuff, and so
excellent.
But, it's been a blessing to have both of them, you know, very involved in the business for all these years.
Yeah,
so.
And franchising, one of the pieces of franchising is that legacy model, where you have the kids come in, and then maybe even the grandkids one day come in, right? And that is the beauty of it. But at the same time, if you don't have that, or you come to the end of the road, then you exit and you work with someone to help to evaluate your business and exit, and you know, and move on because it's done. But in your case, you have this line, and it doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon, where the business is just going to keep on going, and it will stay in the family, which is a beautiful thing.
The last person I talked to when I left the office this morning was my grandson, who was there working today. So.
And how old is he?
16.
16, and he's working in the business. So there you go. So generational. So yeah, you couldn't be more proud, I'm sure, of all that you have built, not only in your family life, but in your business life. And you employ 20, almost 30 people, right?
Yeah.
So you're employing a tremendous amount of staff, which is a lot of responsibility. And I'm sure it keeps you up sometimes at night, right? But
it certainly does.
It's been a phenomenal journey for you, and it hasn't stopped, which is great. So another question I would like to talk to you about is, you know, we're going to come back to the fact that you didn't have a college education, and franchising levels the playing field where they do the training. They train you. If you've got what it takes, often it can be people in the military because they're very process oriented, right?
Very much
so you've got what it takes. They're going to train you. They're going to make you the expert in this business. What were some of the tools that they also gave you that was such a benefit to you as a business owner?
Well, it was the training was important because, you know, I was really with no training, no understanding of the business at all, but it was the surrounding cast. It was the people that were there that were immediately available when I had a question. Like if I had a question at 2 o'clock in the morning, I had people that I could call, and I could run it past them. And so to build up experience, you know, it takes a little bit of time. And so we were just surrounded by people that were willing to help. And I think that's the beauty of the franchise system. It's not adversarial at all. It is, I mean, it almost, like if you saw us, the way we interact with other offices, you would almost think that we're partners.
Right.
And
that's how it's set up.
That's really cool.
Right, that's how it's meant to be. And for those, when people, when I was a franchise owner, the people that were the least successful were the people that did not take part in that partnership. And they were silent and isolated, and they were never on the corporate calls, and they were just trying to do it themselves. And no, that goes against everything that franchising stands for, right? Do you see that as well?
Because we've seen that, and we would say to people, why in the world would you buy a system and then fight against it the entire time? It doesn't make sense to me.
No.
But and those people come and go, and they kind of fizzle out, and you know, they complain on the way in, they complain on the way out,
right.
and I never really understand that. I just don't.
No, and I warn my candidates, I go, don't ever let me hear that you are complaining about having to pay a royalty or pay into the brand fund, because you wouldn't have had this.
Right.
So don't look back once you get successful and then look back and go, well, I don't want to have to pay this to them, because you wouldn't have had any of this without them. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a pain point having to pay that money, but it's all part and cost of having a business in a franchise model.
Yep. You knew it going in, so don't
Right.
complain about it on the way out.
Right, it wasn't a surprise.
Nothing was a surprise.
Yeah, and so the people that do, and it is true, you get the Debbie Downers and the people that just sit there and they complain the whole time, and they put a thorn in everyone's side, and you know that's just, that they're not going to be successful.
Well, we always say that if you spend as much time working the business as you do complaining about it, you would really be successful.
And it's true in all of life,
Yeah,
right? Like
it really
in
is.
every facet of life.
Yeah.
You know, if you come to things with a positive outlook and constructive, abilities for how you're going to work on things, it will be so much better, right?
I'm not saying that I never have a down day.
Of course not. Of course not, because you're a business owner.
Yeah.
But you don't bring down the system with it.
Right.
But you may call one of your trusted partners and going, I'm kicking the wall right now. Help me off the ledge.
Today the business is for sale.
Yes.
Tomorrow it's not.
And then they talk you down, and then you feel good, but you got it off your chest, and now the next day is the next day.
That's what happens. Yep.
Well, wonderful.
It's really a good system. SERVPRO has been it's changed our lives. It's hard. It's every part of it is hard, but you know what? It's worth it. I mean, if you ask me, would I do it again? In a heartbeat, I would do it again.
Well, what a better way to conclude the show than that. Rick, I wish you and all of your family and all of your staff continued success doing such an important job, which is helping people when they're most vulnerable, when they have something that has gone terribly wrong in their home or in their business, and you guys are there, you're a trusted provider to helping them to get out of that mess. And to reach Rick, we're going to put up his contact information so that if you guys are in need of his services, that is there for you. And we wish you continued success all around that Philadelphia area. And this is Franchise Focus, and this is the reason why I do this show, for interviews like this. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much for watching. This show airs every Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and I am your host, Lisa Lankowski. You can learn more about me and my business at milestonefranchising.com. And thanks again to our sponsor, Zoom One Media.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.